Grace Carter staggered down a lonely Montana road, 8 months pregnant and fighting through a blizzard that wanted her dead. She thought she was walking home, until she heard a faint cry in the snow. A German shepherd mother lay there, half frozen, 3 newborn puppies pressed against her, as if love alone could shield them from the cold. Grace wrapped those puppies inside her coat and whispered, "You're safe now." But a sudden contraction brought her to her knees. She wasn't just trying to save them. She was going into labor, in the middle of the storm. And that brave dog, Luna, refused to leave her side. When Grace collapsed, it was Luna who howled into the darkness, calling for a miracle. What happened next would bring an entire town together, restore a mother's faith, and prove that sometimes God sends angels wearing fur. Before we begin, please subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support helps us share more stories of love, loyalty, and the miracles God places in our path. Winter pressed its weight upon Montana, snow swirling like torn pieces of moonlight cast into the windless dark. Grace Carter pulled her scarf tighter around her neck as the storm clawed against her small, rounded frame. She was 27, with dark chestnut hair tucked beneath a knit beanie, cheeks reddened by a harsh winter and an even harsher life. Her belly, 8 months pregnant, made every step a negotiation between balance and courage. She was a waitress at Frosty's Diner in Frost Creek, a tiny town that clung to the foothills like a stubborn dream. The pay was low, the tips were barely more than pity coins, but Grace was grateful to have somewhere to be each day, something to fight for besides her own heartbeat. The world around her was a blurred wall of white. The wind howled like a mother mourning, pushing against her as if demanding she turn back. Grace kept walking, breathing through the ache in her hips. The baby shifted restlessly inside her, and she whispered, "Easy, little one. We're almost home." Though in truth, home was too generous a word. A small cabin with peeling paint and a heater that coughed more than it warmed. But it was hers. Hers alone. And that mattered. She had once imagined a family there. Her husband, Liam, who once promised that no winter would ever touch her heart again. He was tall, freckled, with ambition burning too bright. After Grace's pregnancy brought more bills than dreams, he dimmed, then disappeared. He left a note on the kitchen table that simply read, "I can't do this," along with his wedding ring that had once symbolized forever. So Grace learned to build her own forever. One shift, one meal, one breath at a time. A sound sliced through the wind, faint, broken. Was it the wind shrieking in a new pitch? Grace stopped, listening. There it was again. A whimper, the kind that came from something alive and afraid. She followed the noise, heart pounding faster than the storm. Her boots sank into knee-deep snow with every step, and the cold nipped under her clothes. Something tugged at her instincts, a protective urge older than fear. When she found the source, her breath caught in her throat. A German shepherd mother, no older than 3 years, lay half buried in snow. Her fur, a rich mix of sable and cream, was soaked through, her ribs visible beneath a once strong body now trembling with exhaustion. Beneath her, wrapped in a ragged piece of blue cloth, were 3 tiny puppies, newborns, blind and shivering, mewling softly against the icy air. The mother dog lifted her head, one ear twitching weakly. Her eyes, deep brown and full of a fierce, dying defiance, locked onto Grace's. Warning? Pleading? Hope? Grace felt her chest tighten. She knew what it was to shield someone fragile in a world that didn't care whether they survived. "Oh, sweetheart." Grace knelt with effort, one hand bracing her belly while the other reached out slowly. "You've been fighting too hard for too long, haven't you?" The dog, she would later call her Luna, because she'd found her under a winter moon, let out a low, broken cry. Grace touched Luna's head gently. The fur was icy cold, but the life beneath still flickered. "Not just me protecting my child tonight," she murmured. "You're a mother too." Grace scooped the puppies carefully into her coat, their bodies impossibly tiny, their warmth a fragile miracle. But the moment she tried to help Luna to her feet, the dog collapsed, legs folding as though the earth had given up on holding her. "No, no, no," Grace pleaded. Her heart hammered, adrenaline surging like liquid fire. She was already losing feeling in her fingers, her toes. The baby inside her twisted sharply. A warning, a cry of its own. She needed shelter. Luna needed warmth. The puppies needed both mothers breathing. She slid her arms under Luna's torso, gritting her teeth as her back spasmed. Luna was heavy, far too heavy for a pregnant woman in a blizzard. But Grace didn't let go. She stood, legs shaking, and staggered forward step by brutal step. Only 20 minutes to home, maybe 30, if the storm didn't claim them first. Snow struck her face like thrown sand, visibility shrinking to nothing more than silhouettes of trees. Her breath came in sharp gasps, pain firing through her abdomen like lightning. She could feel it, the tight, rolling contraction. Early labor. Not now. Please, not now. But the baby did not understand pleading. Another contraction tore through her, forcing her to her knees. The puppies whimpered in her coat. Luna managed a weak growl, as if refusing to let Grace give up. Grace tasted fear in her mouth like metal. Her vision swam. She forced herself upright, one hand pressing against the life inside her, the other clutching Luna. "We don't leave family behind," she whispered through chattering teeth. "Not tonight." She stumbled forward again, but the world tilted, a dizzying blur of white and black, before she fell face first into the snow. Her belly hit the ground hard. A cry escaped her lips, raw with terror. The storm swallowed the sound. Darkness crawled at the edges of her sight. She fought to stay awake, for the tiny lives counting on her, but her body betrayed her. As the wind howled triumphantly over the fallen, the mother-to-be and the mother-dog lay side by side, two hearts straining against the winter's claim. And somewhere deep within the storm, time was running out. The storm had not softened by the time Grace Carter forced herself through the doorway of her small rental home. Snow clung to her hair and lashes like fragile ice ornaments, her breath ragged as she lowered Luna gently onto the worn rug by the fireplace. The German shepherd mother trembled, her once proud muscles now thin lines beneath her wet fur. Grace hurried to gather blankets, a mismatched collection of faded wool and cotton, spreading them around the dog and her 3 newborn puppies. She lit the wood stove, sparks dancing upward until crackling flames brought a thin promise of warmth into the darkness. The electricity was out. Likely every house in Frost Creek was the same. But this home felt colder than the world outside. Grace's heart beat heavily in her chest, every throb sinking with the tightening of her abdomen. Her baby was restless again, and she whispered soft reassurance into the air, even as her own fear grew. The puppies began to settle, snuggling toward Luna's belly, and Luna licked Grace's hand as though she knew this woman had pulled them from the brink. Grace smiled, though pain tugged behind the smile like a string pulled too tight. "You're safe now," she murmured. "All of us are." She said it because she needed to believe it. Her cabin was cramped. Just one bedroom, a kitchenette, and this living space now crowded with uncertainty. The wind moaned through the cracks in the door, bringing with it a sharp reminder. Safety had limits. She tried to stand to prepare warm milk for herself and the puppies, but her knees buckled. She grabbed the counter to stay upright, swallowing back a wave of dizziness. Too soon, she thought. Too soon for the baby to come. As she poured heated milk from a dented metal pot into a small cup, she thought of her mother, a woman who carried quiet strength in her bones. Eleanor Carter had been a nurse with pale blonde hair that always smelled faintly of peppermint and antiseptic. She raised Grace alone, teaching her that kindness wasn't a luxury. It was a responsibility. But Eleanor was gone now, lost to a sudden heart attack when Grace was 23. Loneliness had filled the space her mother left, like water filling a sinking boat. Maybe that was why Grace reacted so quickly to Luna and the puppies. She knew the taste of abandonment too well. She sat back down, bottle-feeding one of the smallest puppies whose cries were barely whispers. Luna watched every movement, her ears twitching protectively. Outside, thunder grumbled with the distant authority of mountains shifting. Everything was a reminder that they were isolated, fragile against nature's anger. Then came the pounding. Not a polite knock. Not a neighbor checking in. A forceful, impatient hammering at the door that made Grace flinch. She set the puppy down carefully and struggled to her feet, holding her belly with both hands. The pounding came again. Grace opened the door just a crack. There stood Mr. Harold Finch, her landlord. He was a man in his early 60s, tall but stooped, with gray hair slicked flat against a large square head. His nose was prominent, like a wedge of cold stone, and his blue eyes, pale and sharp, searched the room past Grace's shoulder. His thick wool coat smelled of cigar smoke and damp snow. Finch had inherited this property from his brother, and though he called himself a respectable businessman, most folks around town knew he was just a miser who liked to count other people's struggles. "What in God's name is that smell?" he barked, voice rough like gravel poured into a tin can. Grace tried to steady her breathing. I found a dog in the storm. She has puppies. They would have frozen if I—" Finch scoffed. "Animals aren't allowed inside the premises. You signed a lease, remember?" He tapped the side of the doorframe, as if the legal terms were carved in its wood. His eyes fell to her swollen belly. "You're already behind on rent. Now strays? No, absolutely not." Grace's heart hammered. She positioned herself so he couldn't see Luna or the babies. "Please. It's just until the storm passes. She's just a mother trying to protect her children." Finch's lips curled into a thin, disapproving line. His tone snapped like a brittle tree branch. "If those animals are still here by morning, you and your baby will be out. And don't think for a second the town charity will pick up your slack." He slammed the door hard enough to shake the frame. Grace gasped, her hand flying to her belly as another contraction twisted through her. Tears stung her eyes, not from pain alone, but from fear. Not again, she thought. Not another man deciding her worth in the span of one cold breath. She sank to the floor beside Luna, who pressed her nose gently into Grace's palm, as if offering solidarity. "We'll figure this out," Grace whispered, breath shaking. "All of us, I promise." But her voice faltered as the fire flickered low. The storm howled louder outside, and Grace realized that the safety she had fought so desperately for might have just slipped through her fingers. One icy knock at a time, and dawn would come too soon. The metal roof of the abandoned storage warehouse groaned under the weight of the relentless storm, wind hurling icy pellets of snow against rusted walls. Grace's old pickup truck coughed twice before falling silent, its engine giving up just as she rolled to a stop beside the building. She gripped the steering wheel with numb fingers, her breath shallow as another contraction rippled through her abdomen. Her dark hair clung to her temples with sweat despite the freezing air. Luna, the German shepherd mother, lay curled on the passenger seat, her fur still damp, her breathing shaky yet purposeful. The puppies whimpered softly, their voices like fragile threads tethering all of them to hope. Grace drew in a painful breath and opened the truck door. The cold struck her like a slap. Her boots slid in the slush as she hurried to open the warehouse door, a heavy metal thing that screeched angrily when pushed. Inside was darkness, stale air, and the lingering faint smell of dust, oil, and forgotten years. This place once held crates of farm supplies, back when Grace worked here sorting deliveries under the owner, Mr. Holloway, a kind older man who closed shop when his arthritis grew too painful. No one had been here since. She returned to the truck and lifted the puppies first, their tiny bodies shaking inside her coat. Then she coaxed Luna, who struggled to stand. Luna's legs buckled, but with a trembling determination only a mother has, she pushed herself onward. Grace wrapped an arm around the dog, guiding her inside the warehouse. Every movement felt like her body was tearing apart. Once inside, Grace found a stack of old feed bags and fashioned a nest near a support beam, away from the draft where cold wind slipped through dents in the metal siding. She placed Luna and the puppies there, quickly covering them with her last blanket. Grace sat heavily on an overturned crate nearby, both hands instinctively holding her belly. The baby shifted and kicked, urgency in every movement. "I know," she whispered, voice trembling. "You want out, but just hold on a little longer." Luna crawled closer, pressing her muzzle against Grace's thigh. Her large brown eyes glimmered with concern, canine intuition sensing that something was very wrong. Grace stroked Luna's ears gently. "We're two mothers in over our heads," she murmured. Luna gave a soft whine of agreement. A sudden crash of something falling outside made Grace jolt. Luna's ears perked sharply, body tensing. The warehouse's shadows stretched like claws across the concrete floor. Grace's heart began to pound, but not from fear alone. Another contraction hit, this one fiercer than the last, tearing a gasp from her throat. Moisture pooled warm between her legs. "Oh, God. No!" Grace looked down. Her water had broken. Panic surged. She needed help. She needed someone trained. Her mind raced through possibilities. The hospital was miles away, and the storm was only growing worse. Her boss at the diner, Sarah Whitford, appeared in her thoughts. Sarah was in her mid-40s, a tall woman with short, curly blonde hair streaked silver and a regal sharpness to her posture that made her seem unbreakable. She had a stern exterior, but a heart big enough to feed every lost soul who walked into the diner. Sarah had lost her own child years ago in a miscarriage that broke her marriage, a hurt she hid behind brisk efficiency and perfectly applied lipstick. She was the closest thing Grace had to family. But Sarah's home was far across town, and Grace doubted the roads were passable. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. No signal. The glowing screen mocked her briefly before fading into black again. Her breath hitched. Luna suddenly stood, though unsteadily, and began pacing in front of Grace. The mother dog's hackles raised slightly, a low whine rising in her throat. Not aggression, but urgency. She nudged Grace's arm repeatedly, then ran to the warehouse door and scratched at the lower edge. "You want help?" Grace managed between breaths. "But how?" Luna turned, stared straight into Grace's eyes, and barked. A deep, commanding sound, then another, as if to summon something beyond the storm. The puppies wriggled closer to Luna's warmth, mewling anxiously at their mother's distress. Grace clung to Luna's gaze, her vision blurred with tears and pain. "Don't leave me," she whispered. Fear of abandonment, the oldest wound, cracked open inside her. Luna returned, nuzzling Grace's cheek, a silent vow that she wasn't going anywhere. But the next contraction made Grace fold forward, a cry escaping her lips. The warehouse seemed to spin, cold and vast and merciless. Alone wasn't an option anymore. Not for her, not for the lives depending on her. She forced herself to breathe, counting 1, 2, 3, just like her mother once taught her during bedtime storms. Breathe until the lightning passes. Except this storm was inside her now. "Please," Grace sobbed to the roof, to fate, to anyone listening. "Someone, help us." The wind howled in response, but then, underneath it, something else emerged. Luna stiffened, head lifting. Grace heard it too, a distant engine fighting the snow. Lights flickered faintly through the warped windows. Someone was approaching. Grace's world tilted, half hope and half panic, and just before darkness threatened to swallow her, Luna let out a long, desperate howl, a beacon in the blizzard, declaring to the universe that 2 mothers and 4 children still needed saving. Snow beat its fists against the warped metal walls of the warehouse, each gust a reminder that the storm outside had not relented. Inside, the makeshift shelter flickered with dim firelight from a small pile of smoldering wood Grace had managed to ignite earlier. Her body trembled with exhaustion, her breaths sharp and uneven as waves of labor crashed over her. Sweat and snow mixed on her face as she lay on the concrete floor, leaning back against a pile of feed bags she had dragged together to form a thin cushion. Luna moved restlessly beside her, her once weak body driven by pure maternal instinct. The German shepherd's muzzle was peppered with flecks of snow, her ears pinned back and eyes bright with worry. She rummaged through old debris until she found a tattered blanket. Dusty, frayed, but still a kindness. With effort, Luna dragged it to Grace, placing it beside her like a silent offering. Grace weakly smiled, brushing her fingers over Luna's head. "You're braver than both of us," she whispered. Pain struck again, sharp, urgent. Grace clenched a strip of rope she had found hanging from a rusted ceiling beam. It tasted of dust and age, but it grounded her as she pushed, gritting through the agony. Her lower back screamed. Her stomach tightened like a vice. Her mind flashed through moments of her life. Her mother's gentle laugh. The day she learned she was pregnant. The night Liam left with his dreams and without her. She was terrified. But terror had no place now. Lives depended on her strength. Luna pressed close and lending warmth from her fur, while the whimpers of her puppies echoed like tiny prayers in the darkness. The wind outside howled louder, yet inside new sounds began to rise, the primal breaths of birth. And then, an infant's cry. Soft but real. Fragile but fierce. Grace stared in disbelief as she lifted her daughter into her shaking arms. A baby girl, tiny and pink as dawn light, crying against the blood and cold. Tears blurred Grace's vision. Ooh. Hi, my love, she choked out, voice breaking with relief and gratitude. The baby's cry was weaker than it should be, but it was life. Beautiful, stubborn life. Luna nudged Grace's arm gently, then licked her fingers as if blessing the newborn. Fur against skin, heartbeat beside heartbeat. Two mothers united by instinct and survival. The puppies crawled closer, and Luna curled around Grace, creating a protective barrier of heat around the vulnerable. But Grace had lost too much blood. Her skin turned pale, her eyelids heavy as stones. She pressed the baby closer to her chest, trying to keep her warm. Her vision swam in and out like a flickering candle struggling to stay lit. The world around her dimmed. Not like this, she thought. Please. Not before she knows I love her. Her head slumped back, and she drew in a thin, trembling breath. That was when the door burst open, slamming against the wall with a crack that startled Luna into a defensive stance. She growled, standing over Grace and the baby, with her tail arched and teeth showing. Two figures rushed in, snow swirling behind them like frantic ghosts. The first was a tall man in his early 30s, a police officer named Nathan Walker. He had a strong jaw dusted with dark stubble and steady hazel eyes hardened by years of seeing too many tragedies he couldn't stop. He wore a heavy navy jacket, a badge clinking against his chest. Nathan had returned to Frost Creek after losing his younger sister to a hit-and-run years ago, a grief that made him vow never to ignore a cry for help again. When he spotted Grace's truck abandoned in the storm, headlights dimming beneath the snowfall, he refused to wait for backup. Beside him was Emily Sanchez, a local nurse in her late 20s. She was petite, with warm brown skin and a cascade of dark curls tied back in a messy bun. Her fingers always smelled faintly of antiseptic, and her voice often carried the soothing tone of someone who had dedicated her life to calming chaos. Emily acted fast, dropping her medical bag beside Grace. "She's hemorrhaging," Emily breathed, pressing gauze to Grace's side. "And the baby's cold. We need to get them both to the clinic now." Nathan holstered his flashlight and crouched low, his movements slow, not to frighten Grace or Luna. "Easy, girl," he said softly to the dog. "We're here to help your family." Something in his tone, steady, respectful, made Luna hesitate. Her growl softened into a worried whine. Grace's lips parted, her voice barely a whisper. "Please, don't leave her. Luna, her babies." Nathan nodded, his promise rock solid. "No one is getting left behind tonight." He carefully wrapped the newborn in Luna's blanket before handing her gently to Emily. Then, with strong arms, he lifted Grace as though she weighed nothing. Luna barked anxiously, but did not attack, her trust given to the strangers who came like salvation. As they carried Grace and the baby into the snow-lit storm, Luna followed closely, her puppies bundled in Grace's coat. Emily shielded the infant against her chest, while Nathan guided them through gusts of white roaring around them. The warehouse dimmed behind them, but ahead, car lights waited like hope waiting to return. Grace's consciousness flickered. She looked down at her daughter's tiny face, a miracle born in winter's teeth, and felt a single thought steady her heart. We survived tonight because love refused to let us die. Then everything faded to black. A soft beeping rhythm was the first thing Grace heard when consciousness returned. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the room, replacing the cold metal and dust of the warehouse. Fluorescent lights hummed quietly overhead. She blinked through the haze, the white hospital ceiling slowly resolving into clarity. Her throat felt dry, but her first instinct wasn't to ask for water. It was to find her baby. Her eyes snapped downward, and a wave of relief rushed through her when she saw the clear plastic bassinet beside the bed. Her daughter, impossibly small, wrapped in a pale yellow blanket, slept with her tiny mouth parted just slightly, a soft breath rising and falling. A small pink hat covered her head, and a name card handwritten by a nurse read simply, "Baby Carter." A quiet, choked sound caught in Grace's chest. She extended a trembling hand and brushed her baby's little fingers through the plastic barrier, and the baby's hand curled instinctively, like a promise. Morning. Grace turned her head and saw Officer Nathan Walker standing nearby, hands tucked into the pockets of his uniform pants. His hazel eyes looked softer under the warm hospital light. His stubble was more noticeable now, a rough shadow hinting at sleepless hours spent awake for strangers. Nathan was holding a thin stack of paperwork and a silver pen clipped to the top. He stepped closer, offering her a reassuring smile, one that softened sharp edges carved by regrets he still carried. "You did it," he said quietly. "You saved all of them. Your daughter, Luna. The puppies." Grace's eyes widened. "Luna, is she?" "All safe," Nathan answered before she could spiral into panic. "Emily made sure the little ones are warm and fed. And Luna," he huffed a small laugh, "she hasn't let anyone get near her puppies except me and Emily. Fiercest mother I've ever met." Grace smiled weakly, tears gathering without permission. She whispered, "Where are they now?" "In the animal care unit downstairs," Nathan replied, and then he lifted the papers in his hands. "And thanks to this, they're officially under your temporary guardianship. No one, and I mean no one, is taking them away from you, Tahoe." Grace stared, disbelief turning into overwhelming gratitude. Her lips trembled. For the first time in years, her tears didn't come from fear. They flowed because hope had finally taken shape. Nathan looked around awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous habit that hinted at the gentleness beneath the badge. "The town found out what you did," he continued. "Sarah Whitford started a donation drive. And—" he paused, searching Grace's expression. "People wanted to help. A lot of people." Grace blinked. "Help? Me?" "Help your family," he corrected softly. Later that afternoon, wrapped in a warm coat provided by the nurses, Grace stepped outside with her daughter in her arms, lungs filling with air that smelled cleaner than any breath she remembered. The snowstorm had passed. The sky was a glorious blue, sharp and bright, like the world had been remade overnight. Nathan drove her in his patrol car to a quiet edge of Frost Creek. When he stopped, Grace stepped out slowly, her daughter nestled to her chest. She stared ahead in awe. A small cottage stood before her, walls painted a fresh coat of white, a red front door, smoke gently dancing from the chimney. The yard was wide, fenced with rustic wood and thick with soft snow that would soon melt into grass where paws could run wild. On the porch, Sarah Whitford waved both arms dramatically. Her blonde silver hair was tucked into a knitted maroon hat, her tall figure bundled in a heavy coat. She looked like someone determined not to cry, and absolutely failing. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Sarah called out with a grin too bright to hide her emotion. "You didn't think we'd let you live in that falling-apart cabin anymore, did you?" Grace's body shook with silent sobs. She held her baby close, overwhelmed by kindness. Before she could speak, Luna suddenly bounded from inside the cottage, restored strength in her muscles and brightness in her eyes. Her puppies tumbled excitedly behind her, 3 tiny puffs of fur yipping in delight. Luna ran to Grace, nuzzling the baby gently, acknowledging her sibling in this strange, stitched-together family. Sarah sniffed loudly. "Look at them, like they belong together." Grace knelt into the snow, Luna pressing against her, puppies climbing into her lap. She whispered into Luna's fur, tears landing softly. "Family isn't blood. It's who chooses you in the storm." The sun glowed behind them, casting long shadows of a mother, a newborn child, a brave dog, and her pups. One silhouette of love woven from survival. Inside the warm cottage that evening, baby Carter slept near the fireplace while Luna curled around her own babies. Grace rested on a couch covered with handmade quilts donated by neighbors. Nathan and Sarah chatted over hot chocolate at the small kitchen table, glancing often toward Grace with quiet admiration. Grace looked at the newborn in her arms, her eyes full of dreams she once thought she'd lost. "You were born in a storm," she whispered, "but you'll grow under calm skies. You're home now." For the first time in a long time, Grace believed her own words. And under one roof, 2 mothers and their children slept safe. Love standing guard where fear once lived. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with trumpets from the heavens. Sometimes they crawl through a blizzard on shivering paws, or cry their very first breath in a dusty warehouse, or come in the shape of a helping hand from someone who refuses to look away. Tonight, 2 mothers, one human, one canine, taught us a truth we often forget. Family isn't determined by blood, but by love strong enough to survive any storm. If you believe that God works through ordinary hearts, through the compassion of strangers, through the courage of a mother who refuses to give up, then Grace's story is a reminder for us all. Miracles still happen. Faith still saves. Love is the language of God. Before you go, take a moment to think about the storms around you. Maybe someone near you is fighting quietly, desperate for a warm hand to hold. Be the miracle they're praying for. Be the shelter someone needs. If this story touched something deep within you, leave a comment sharing where you're watching from Hit. Like so more hearts can feel this hope and subscribe to join us. Because here we believe in second chances, wagging tails, and God's endless grace. May the Lord bless you, guide you through your storms, and fill your life with the kind of love that chooses you in the darkest night and walks beside you into the light. Until next time, keep faith, and remember, every heart deserves a home.